Right, in this video, we're going to talk about the domain and the range. So when we're talking about domain is always your x values, and those values go from the left to the right on a graph. So you can see they would go from here to here. The range is the y values. So those always go from the bottom to the top. So you start at the bottom and you go to the top looking for the values. So when something is open, that means we've got an open circle or we've got an arrow on the end of something. That means we use parentheses or we use less than or greater than symbols. And it means the value is not included. When something is closed, it means I have a closed dot or I have some kind of solid line or solid curve. That would be something that will be considered closed when we look at a graph. When we're closed, we use brackets or less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. And that means that the value is included. All right, so let's put these two things into practice now. Oh, there's one other thing, notation. So this is what something would look like in inequality notation, meaning we use the inequalities. It's kind of like a sandwich. Your smaller number goes first, your bigger number goes second. We always use less than symbols. Set notation, which we're not really going to test you on, but it's good to know that it exists. You start with these curly Q brackets, you put X, and you put a bar. The bar means is, okay? And then you just use the same notation as the inequality notation. So that's what we consider set notation. You're not responsible for knowing that for our quiz. Interval notation, however, is you use the same number. So our smaller number is -2 and our bigger number is 10. When we have a less than that's the same as open. So for open, we use a parentheses. So we use a parentheses, so it's open. And again, it's parentheses open. If that had an equal sign, we would have used a bracket. So it kind of looks like a coordinate. It's not. It's called interval notation. All right, so we're going to try this. It wants us to find the domain and the range. We're not going to do the set notation. We're only going to do interval and inequality. Okay, so domain is the x value. So I'm starting to the left, and I'm going to look for the numbers first. I notice that my first number is -2. So I'm going to write that down for both of these. I know it's x's, so I'm going to write an x in the middle. And I notice that this first value here is closed because it's a closed dot. So for inequality notation, I write less than or equal to. And for interval notation, I write a bracket. Then I know that this next value is at 2. I notice that it's an open circle. So I know that that's open, which means I use a less than and I use a parentheses. All right, now we're going to look at the range, which is the y values. And since I already know that that's the y values, I could automatically, for inequality notation, put a y in the center. So I'm going to go from bottom to top. So I'm looking at the bottom. I know that I've got a -4 on the bottom. Now, I have both an open and a closed. When I have that situation going on, closed wins. So always use the closed. So I would use a less than or equal to and a bracket. I'm going to look for my top value. My top value is at 0. Now, notice that this top value here is on a solid curve. On that solid curve, I would have a bracket because it's closed. It's equal to that. So a bracket and a less than are equal to. All right, we're going to try it again. We're not going to worry about is it a function yet. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of set notation. Okay, inequality for the domain, I know I'm doing my x's. Okay, I'm going to start to the left. So I'm starting to the x value most to the left, which is -5. I write that down for both. Okay. It has a closed and a closed. So that means I'm going to go less than or equal to or a bracket for interval notation. I'm going to go to the rightmost value, which is here at -1. And again, I've got a solid curve, so I would use a less than or equal to or a bracket. Okay, now we're going to do our range. We know range is the y values. So I'm going to go to my bottommost y value, which is at -4. And it's solid. So I'm going to go less than or equal to, or I'm going to use a bracket for interval notation. All right. My uppermost y value is 4. And it's solid. So I've got a less than or equal to, or a bracket. All right, let's take a look at this one here. Okay, again, we're not going to do set notation. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go domain as x's, and I could actually write range as y's. Doesn't matter when I write that. I know I've got that in there. Okay, so domain, I'm starting to the leftmost value. Now, that arrow means that it goes to the left forever and ever and ever and ever. And if I'm going to the left forever and ever and ever and ever, that means I am going to negative infinity is what forever means. And something that has an arrow on the end of it or is infinity is always open. So I would use a less than or a parentheses if I'm in interval notation. Then if I go all the way to the right, I have that arrow. It looks like it's going up, but it's also pointing towards the right. So, and it's going towards the right forever and ever and ever and ever. So I would use positive infinity for both of those. And then I know that an arrow means open, so I'm going to use a less than, I'm going to use a parentheses. Okay, taking a look at the range, I start on the bottom. I know the smallest value is 0. And that is a solid curve in both of those places. So that means it's something that is closed. So I would use a less than or equal to, or for interval notation, I use a bracket. All right, and then I notice it's going up, 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 up to infinity. Okay, so it's going to go up forever. So I'm going to use infinity and infinity. Arrows always mean it's open. So I'm going to go less than or a parentheses. All right, taking a look at this one here. Okay, it's asking me to find the domain and range, but I'm only doing inequality notation. Okay. So I'm going to pick the value that is, so my domain is my x values, and my range is my y values. Okay, so for domain, I go the most to the left, which is -4. It's an open dot, so I go less than. Okay, my furthest to the right is 3, and the circle is open, so I go less than. Okay. All right, let's take a look at range. So range, I'm going to go for my bottom value, which looks like it's -2. And notice that's on a solid curve, so it's less than or equal to. Okay. We're going to go all the way to the top here. So that's going to be my is a 4. It's an open dot is the highest point, so I'm going to use a less than. All right, this one says we have to use interval notation and do both a domain and a range. Okay. All right, so my domain is the x values. I don't have to write x or y, though, on these. So my domain is my x values. My smallest x value to the left is -5. It's got an open circle, so in interval notation, that means that I use a parentheses. I'm going to go to my x value that's most to the right. I notice that it's a 2. It's a solid dot, so I'm going to use a bracket. Range is the y value, so I'm going to start at the bottommost value, which looks like it's -3. It's an open dot, so I use a parentheses. I'm going to go all the way to the top of the function. The y value at the top of the function is 0, and it's a closed dot, so I would use a bracket. All right, it's the last one. This says set notation. Let's not do set notation. Let's pick something else. Let's practice this in, let's practice it in interval notation again. Okay. All right, so domain is my x values. My x values go down. So we're thinking about x values. We're going to the left. That arrow means it keeps going to the left and left and left and left. So keep going to the left means I'm going to negative infinity. This arrow here, and that's infinity is always open, so I'd use a parentheses. This arrow here means I am going, even though it looks like it's going up, you got to make your brain think it's going to the right, 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 right. Okay? So when I'm going to the right, 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 that's something that's going to positive infinity. Arrows and infinity always mean open parentheses. Okay, now we're going to talk about the top and the bottom. The range is we start at the bottom. Well, that bottom is the arrow that goes down, 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 down. The lowest down would be negative infinity. It's something that's open, okay? So we'd use a parentheses. The top of the function is up here with this arrow, and it keeps going up, 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 up. That goes on forever. And so that is going to be positive infinity. And an infinity is always an open parentheses.